The smell hits before the sound. Sweet rot laced with metal, smoke tinged with incense, something chemical on the back of the tongue, burning. Somewhere in the dark, a low stick flares. A soldier draws in breath, not to calm nerves, not to find courage, just to remember he's still alive for a few more seconds. Then the vox crackles, then the stubbers start. Out on the ash-scarred plains of Valgotha Secundus, the mud isn't just wet, it's soft with blood. The sky's the colour of old bruises, streaked with oil and fire. Inside a half-collapsed trench line, 3 Astra Militarum conscripts slump shoulder to shoulder. One's twitching, one's laughing, one's already gone, pupils wide and face frozen in a grin stitched by detox withdrawals. The medici cart came 12 hours too late, maybe 30. Above them, lasfire traces neon arcs across the night. Below, in the dirt, combat drugs bloom like fungus in a corpse. Dreamstim, Ghast, Calma, Fervor. Words that don't just name substances, they name rituals. Every hiveworld, every regiment, every manufacture and press has its own version. Some ground into powder, some swallowed in capsules, some mainlined straight into the neck, with an injector syringe that buzzes like a dying servo skull. They're not taken casually, they're taken like rites, like prayers, like bullets. This is not a universe where soldiers get therapy, not a galaxy where pain is something to be healed. In the Imperium of man, pain is a form of truth. And if the Emperor's armies are to survive, that truth must be chemically denied. So when the order comes to advance and you're already running on 20 hours without sleep, 27 without food, and you've just watched your squad mate implode from a plasma misfire, there's no time to grieve, no time to think. There's just a moment where you feel the cold kiss of a stim-pen jabbed into your thigh and the world goes thin and fast and far away. That's the real beginning of our story. Not with the first drug, not with the first addict, not even with the first kill made sweeter by neural accelerants. It begins with the need. The galaxy didn't start addicted. It was driven there. World by world, war by war. The descent wasn't chaos, it was procedure. And the more we descend, the more we'll understand why. Why the Inquisition burns worlds to keep a single shipment from spreading. Why the Mechanicus won't document certain compounds even under pain of disassembly. Why hive primuses turn blind eyes to Ghast smog rising in Sector Delta 12 so long as production quotas are met. And why the Emperor's children, those fallen sons of perfection, stopped using drugs as a means and started using them as a reason. But we're not there yet. Right now, we're just in the trench. Listening, breathing in steel, watching a war flicker across the stars, waiting for the hit to kick in, waiting to forget, because in the grim darkness of the far future, pain is everywhere, and forgetting it, that's the only high left. No one knows how many narcotics exist across the Imperium, not because the records don't exist, though many don't, but because the Imperium doesn't count in ways the rest of us would recognize. There is no centralized agency tracking substance use. There is no oversight body tallying addiction rates. There is only the machine spirit of the Manufactorum, the quotas of the Munitorum, and the silence of the Administratum's darkest alcoves, where files go to be buried. And still, the substances flow, low sticks, ubiquitous, cheap, smoked from the upper hives of terror to the slave pits of Vrax, sometimes laced with mild euphorics, sometimes tainted with things far worse. Officially legal in many sectors, unofficially mandatory in others. You can trace the rise of low distribution directly to hive-world morale collapse during the Third Nicaean expansion. Entire regiments were shipped to the front with pallets of low packed tighter than their rations. Then there's Obscura, stronger, slower, sinks into the nervous system like a memory you wish you didn't have. Smuggled in by rogue traders, grown in sunless vaults, cut with everything from powdered cotin to liquefied grinweed. It's not a substance anymore, it's a culture. From the Obscura dens of Tarsis Ultra to the vision crypts of Necromunda, Obscura isn't just used, it's worshipped. There are cults that believe the Emperor can be seen in the smoke if you're pure enough, or broken enough. And beyond those, the names only get darker. Dream juice. Known to cause vivid hallucinations, some prophetic, others just screams with shape. It's banned in 3 segmenti. Still appears in 9. Detox, ironically, doesn't cleanse. It suppresses withdrawal symptoms long enough to keep a servitor on its feet until the gears seize. Crystal ersatz, once a failed industrial solvent, now a favourite among ministorum clerks looking for clarity before dawn prayers. Flects, mirror-like shards found in certain warp-touched ruins, are neither inhaled nor ingested. They're simply looked at. And looking is enough to change you. But it's not just addicts and thrill-seekers. The Imperium's own bureaucracies fuel the market. Arbites raid one den while administratum scribes skim credits from another. Planetary governors impose local bans while privately investing in the narcotics being trafficked out. Entire hive sectors are maintained not through loyalty, but sedation. Calmer clouds pumped through ventilation. Kosh-laced rations to keep the workers smiling just long enough. An obedient labour force isn't one that fears. It's one that dreams just enough to keep waking up. And if the source is too obvious, if a new variant spreads too quickly, an Inquisitor steps in. Quiet. Surgical. Cities vanish. Habs are firebombed. No explanation given. Because some drugs do more than alter minds. Some open doors, and some let things in. Even the ecclesiarchy gets its hands dirty. Penshell seeds burned in censers during high mass. Sleeper extracts used to induce stasis trances in penitent priests. Sanctioned substances, they call them. And maybe they are. Maybe they're holy. Or maybe the difference between a stim and a sacrament is just how many relics you put next to the dosage vial. In the Imperium of man, suffering is sacred, but sedation is strategy. And as trillions kneel in prayer, billions more numb the silence however they can. Some to cope, some to forget, and some just to feel something real, even if it's a hallucination. This isn't a flaw, this is a function. Because the Imperium doesn't fight for joy, or hope, or peace, it fights to endure. And to endure, sometimes, it needs to not feel at all. There are no medals for pain, no purity seals for endurance, no scrollwork script on a banner that says, "This soldier bled the longest." In the grim calculus of the Imperium, only one thing matters: operational capacity. You are either able to kill, or you are biomass. And if you are able, you must remain able. No matter how shattered, no matter how broken. That's what the combat elixirs are for. Start with the Astra Militarum, billions strong, billions more forgotten. Each regiment has its own cocktail, its own chemical rites, its own way of keeping the meat walking. Some are injections. Some are tongue tabs that dissolve in 3 seconds flat. Others are gas released in the hab-sealed armour of siege troopers who no longer remember the sound of their own voices. The most common is fervour, a neurostimulant that doesn't just increase reaction time, it removes the ability to hesitate. It's not courage, it's not willpower, it's the absence of choice. Soldiers pumped full of fervour charge into plasma fire not because they're brave, but because their brain doesn't recognise fear fast enough to stop their legs. Then there's Redux, a battlefield painkiller. Binds to neural receptors and blocks trauma signals almost completely. You can lose an arm, keep shooting, and not notice until someone else starts screaming for you. But the catch? Redux doesn't distinguish between physical pain and emotional. That scream you hear echoing in the ruins? That's not someone wounded. That's someone realizing the drug's wearing off. Dreamstim is rarer. Technically off books, still finds its way into psycho units and Black Ops infiltration cells. Supposedly heightens spatial awareness and temporal perception. In reality, it fractures both. You feel like you're seeing 3 seconds into the future, but only because your mind's replaying the present until you hallucinate the outcome. Some operators swear by it, others just never come back. Ghast is the real monster. Synthesized from warp-touched fungus in deep hive vaults, it was first used by enforcer kill teams needing night vision in zero-lumen environments. Now, it's used by penal legions looking to boost aggression before final deployments. It sharpens sight, increases stamina, and invites something else to look through your eyes while you're using it. But for a soldier scheduled to die in the next 2 hours, possession is just another word for effectiveness. And of course, there are the Astartes. Space Marines don't just use combat drugs, they are built around them. Every organ, every implant, every gene seed tweak is a cocktail of bioalchemy that would turn a normal human into wet ash. The catalepsian node allows them to function without sleep. The Laraman's organ floods their blood with coagulants and cellular adhesives the moment skin breaks. The eulytic kidney filters toxins with surgical precision. But these aren't just adaptations, they are metabolics designed to interface with stimulants. Many chapters manufacture their own combat elixirs, specific to their own needs, cultures, and battle doctrine. The Blood Angels are rumoured to use a derivative of Kalmar to suppress the Black Rage in unstable initiates. The Iron Hands favour neural acceleration compounds that turn hesitation into calculated slaughter. The Carcharodons are whispered to inhale chemical war fumes drawn from a pre-imperial source that even the Mechanicus won't classify. None of this is illegal, none of this is secret. Because for the Adeptus Astartes, battle is not survived, it is optimized. Pain is a data point, fear is a reflex to be deleted, and victory is worth any chemical compromise. The heretic tells you that using these substances is a weakness. The Xenos tells you it makes you less human. But the Emperor never told you to be human. He told you to win. And if the only path to victory runs through a needle, then you bleed forward. There are addicts. And then there are those who tear holes in reality just to feel again. The Emperor's children were once paragons. Perfect form, perfect war. Their every strike a ballet. Their every movement a hymn to mastery. But what happens when perfection is reached? What happens when the crescendo never ends? You go looking for higher notes, even if you have to invent them. That's where the drugs come in, not as tools, not as supports, as instruments. And they don't call them drugs. That's too crude, too pedestrian. These are keys. They unlock states, transform limits, rewrite the laws of perception itself. The descent began before the heresy. Quiet, ritualized, a stim before a duel, a neural enhancer to hear battlefield symphonies more clearly. But after the fall, after they gave themselves to Slaanesh, the line between combat and communion disappeared. They became composers of agony, take Admilodox. A neuroleptic so potent it dissolves pain entirely, replacing it with cascading emotional feedback. Every wound becomes pleasure, every scar a crescendo. Administered through a subdermal mesh that triggers automatically with each strike received. There are warbands that duel just to bleed joy. Or black lethe, a liquid oblivion. 1 drop and all memory is gone for hours. 2 drops and your sense of self detaches like dead skin. Used by noise marines to erase identity before performances. They do not play music, they are music. And lethe lets them vanish into it. Crystal ersatz is more common. Cut with powdered bone from captured loyalists, said to increase auditory acuity until a scream sounds like a choir. Some Emperor's children wear rebreathers not for toxins, but to filter beauty. Too much static from an unenhanced world ruins the high. And then there's idea. The name is a joke. It doesn't give you thoughts, it becomes them. A psychoreactive vapor inhaled through mechadendrites, surgically embedded in the skull. Each dose creates an emotional hallucination tailored to the user's deepest, most repressed hunger. No 2 experiences are the same. No 2 uses leave the mind unchanged. But the drugs aren't the point. The pursuit is. Slaanesh doesn't demand devotion. Slaanesh demands escalation. The Emperor's children inject pain, pleasure, madness, clarity, silence, sound, sometimes all at once. Not because they want to feel, but because they want to need to feel. The difference matters. One is curiosity, the other is compulsion in its purest form. They lace their bolters with Ghast mist, so the act of firing is laced with euphoric spasms. They coat their armor's inner layers with micro-injectors loaded with Kalmar venom, so impact from enemy fire triggers dopamine storms. They hollow out captured medici servitors, fill them with stacks of synth flesh, and create living pharmacies they carry into battle like sacred relics. This isn't excess for its own sake. This is devotion. Their god is sensation, and every compound is a liturgy. What would these substances do to a normal human? Melt them, shatter them, rewire them so completely that the very idea of reality would become unrecognizable. But that's the point. The Emperor's children don't want to survive their narcotics. They want to be remade by them. They aren't chasing oblivion. They're chasing godhood. And every needle is a prayer. There are chemicals that don't obey human biology. There are highs that don't translate. And then there are substances so alien that to even name them is to risk contamination. But still, they exist. Because the stars are not silent. And where there is intelligence, there is experimentation, escape, excess. The Eldar, those ancient survivors of decadence, should know better than anyone. Once they drowned themselves in every pleasure the galaxy could offer. Now, they walk a razor's edge of control. For the craft-world kin, most narcotics are taboo, not forbidden by law, rejected by necessity. Their souls teeter close to the warp, and sensation is a doorway Slaanesh watches hungrily. But even among them, there are whispers. Kiksa, a vapor distilled from the petals of frozen void roses, said to evoke memories not your own, used in private mourning rituals. Maybe. Or maybe in secret by those who miss the old ways just enough to pretend. Their darker cousins, the Drukhari, feel no such restraint. They revel in chemical warfare, not just on others, but on themselves, pain as fuel, suffering as craft. Sniff musk, a psychostimulant harvested from necroparasites found in Komarar's underhabs, is snorted during duels to enhance response time and trigger temporary ego dissociation. It's not just about winning. It's about watching yourself win while your identity fractures across 100 psychic mirrors. The homunculi go further. They create drugs that don't have names. That shouldn't have names. Organic narcotics stitched from the neural filaments of tortured slaves. Liquids that rewrite the spine's relationship to gravity. Injections that turn sound into taste, pain into shape. These aren't substances. They're experiments. Not meant to be survived. Meant to be documented. The orcs are simpler, but only on the surface. Most wouldn't call what they do drug use, but that's because they are the drug. Fungal physiology, symbiotic organics, everything in an orc's body is built to burn hot and regenerate. The stuff they chew, snort, or smear onto their skin, half of it's just food. The other half is improvised combat stims grown in field vats. One type of doomberry paste sends them into a frenzied state where they can shrug off laser-gun volleys. Another makes their eyes glow and their aim slightly better, at least until their heart explodes. But that's fine. They'll grow another. And the Tau? Controlled, restrained. That's the surface again. Beneath it there's Gladstones, a psychotropic compound administered by the Earth caste to high-performing fire warriors, marketed as a neurobalance enhancer. Really, it's emotional suppression wrapped in propaganda. The Tau don't need to feel loyalty, just act like they do. And if that requires medicating individuality into submission, so be it. The greater good endures. Even the Necrons, long beyond flesh, aren't immune. Certain cryptex in the Zarakan dynasty have been observed harvesting neural residue from fallen foes. Why? No one knows. But there are rumors of dream juice derivatives injected into cortical simulacra, briefly simulating consciousness before shutdown. Not narcotics, in the human sense, but a curiosity, a hunger, a memory of what it meant to feel. And the Tyranids? They don't use drugs. They are drugs. Some of their spores induce ecstatic rage. Others calm prey populations until they stop resisting harvest. Chemical warfare not as a tactic, but as a metabolic inevitability. Wherever they go, the ecosystem changes, because the air becomes part of them. To breathe near a hive fleet is to inhale addiction without ever knowing you've started. Across the galaxy, every species dances with substances that blur the line between autonomy and instinct. For humans, they are vices. For Xenos, they are tools, crutches, weapons, revelations. But in the end, the high is always the same. You become something else. And you never come all the way back. There are no safe distances from the warp. Even in real space, far from the eye, behind walls of ceramite, beneath cathedrals of blessed gold and void-shielded thought, there are substances that carry its echo, not because they connect to the warp, because they remember it. The first and most infamous are flecks, simple, harmless in form, a sliver of mirror glass, thin as an oath, found only in derelict ships that pass too close to the Imperium and return with something else inside. You don't smoke them, you don't inject them, you look. That's it. Just one glance. Just long enough for the light to shift. And what you see isn't reflection. It's memory. Not yours. Not anyone's. It's the warp seeing itself. There are Flect cults who spend hours staring into them, waiting for divine patterns to emerge. Others go blind in minutes, screaming hymns that don't fit their mouths. The Inquisition burns Flect caches on sight, not because they're dangerous, because they're inviting. Then there's idea again, mentioned before, but it lives here too. It doesn't just amplify thought, it twists it. Warp-touched vapor can embed rogue mimetic fragments into your cognition. Start as a hallucination. End as a possession. That voice in your ear? It isn't just a side effect. It's a sender. Dream juice, in its pure form, is sourced from the brain fluid of psychers who die during failed astropathic alignment. Condensed and treated in black zone manufactoria, it produces vivid, shared hallucinations, whole crowds seeing the same unreality. It's said that under dream juice, time stutters, thoughts leak. You might scream something you've never heard in a language you've never learned. Or worse, someone else might scream your memories, perfectly recited. But the most dangerous warp drugs don't come from the black market. They come from sanctioned use. The Ordo Malleus deploys stims designed to inoculate Inquisitors against demonic influence. Taken in microdoses, they blur the interface between human consciousness and warp phenomena. In theory, this makes the mind more resistant to intrusion. In practice, it makes the line between hunter and hunted dissolve. Calma, commonly used to suppress civilian riots, is warp-reactive in certain variants. When used in proximity to unsanctioned psychers, its sedative effect sometimes inverts, inducing euphoria and lucidity so intense it mimics religious ecstasy. It's not a bug, it's not a feature, it's an omen. And there are the silent rooms, the ones no one talks about, where Kosh, a transdimensional inhalant, is tested on prisoners of the black ships. It doesn't cause visions, it removes barriers. Memories fall out of the subject. So do thoughts that don't belong to them, or to anyone, just static, shaped into meaning. The Adeptus Astra Telepathica records the results, then terminates the subjects, every time. Why? Because the warp is not a place, it is a pressure, and once you touch it, once your mind folds open just wide enough, something answers. These are not highs, these are invitations. Some see angels. Others see geometries that can't exist. Some feel like they've left their bodies. Others feel like something else entered instead. And the longer you chase the sensation, the more you slip. One day you come back wrong, or you don't come back at all. And someone else wears your name. You'd think the Ordo Hereticus would handle it, or maybe the Ordo Malleus, if the warp's involved. Ordo Xenos, if the strain originated off-world. Or maybe a local Arbites branch, a planetary governor's private enforcers, or just a cold midnight visit from someone you never saw. But here's the truth. No one knows who handles it. Not completely. Because narcotics in the Imperium aren't just a criminal problem. They're a philosophical one. A moral crisis too big to be solved, too profitable to be stopped, too sacred to be named. The Inquisition doesn't treat drugs as contraband. It treats them as vectors. Vectors for chaos, for mutation, for spiritual degradation, but not always for extermination. That's the dilemma. Burn every den and you risk collapse. Leave them alone and you risk ascension, of a kind no throne-fearing soul dares name aloud. So the Inquisition balances, weighs, chooses. They know about the Obscura dens under Hive Galen's central spire. They let them run. Not because they approve, but because shutting them down would destabilize production output across 3 adjacent sectors. Better to monitor, insert a few informants, erase the suppliers, not the customers, maintain the ecosystem. Elsewhere, it's extermination. Entire hab blocks gassed with airborne detox when traces of Flect distribution are found. No announcement, no explanation, just containment. The survivors, if there are any, are blind and babbling, consigned to ecclesiarchal rehabilitation that looks more like psychic exorcism. Some Inquisitors go further. They use the drugs, test them, try to understand what drives heresy before it blooms. Some even weaponize the narcotics themselves, lacing captured Ghast with mimetic kill phrases, distributing altered low sticks among cults so that when the time comes, they can trigger mass seizures at the press of a vox bead. It works, sometimes, and when it doesn't, they torch everything anyway. But the hardest part isn't suppression, it's distinction. Because where is the line? Between a sanctioned stim that keeps a guardsman alive and a heretic compound that renders him immortal but insane. Between a psychic inhibitor used to treat trauma in navigators and a warp-tainted vapor that teaches a human how to pray in demon tongue. The Inquisition is not unified. They argue Puritans demand absolute cleansing, zero tolerance, no matter the cost. Better to lose a planet than let a single dosage compromise the Emperor's light. Radicals see tools where others see threats. They know the galaxy's ending already. Why not fight fire with fire? And in the middle, the tired ones. The ones who've seen hive worlds die screaming. Who've seen what happens when a factory worker on Cotton decides his pain is finally louder than his loyalty. Who've walked into Administratum ruins flooded with dreamstim fog and come out changed. They don't burn everything. They burn just enough. And then they drink Amasek in silence and try not to remember the screaming. There is no codified policy, no doctrine of control, just whispers, just field orders, and a single rule that passes from one Inquisitor to the next. If you don't understand the drug, you haven't found the threat. Somewhere out there, in the gut of a forgotten hive, a child breathes in calmer fumes and dreams of angels made of glass. On a strike cruiser drifting near the edge of Segmentum Obscurus, a space marine slides a vial of Redux into his combat harness. His gene seed rejects it. He uses it anyway. And deep beneath the Mechanicus vault, sealed by sigils no tech priest will admit to carving, there's a slab of meat that was once human, now twitching, whispering, still alive in some chemical sense, still high on a stim blend that never wore off. The scribes say it's a relic. The Inquisitors say it's a warning. The Martians just call it an error in the machine spirit's design. The truth is simpler. The Imperium is addicted, not just to substances, but to survival, to forgetting, to remembering too much. Every war zone is a pharmacy. Every battlefield a proving ground for the next compound, the next concoction, the next mind-broken weapon. It's not a coincidence. It's not a tragedy. It's a system. One built to push flesh until it breaks, then patch it just enough to break again tomorrow. We like to think the great threats are out there. Demons, Xenos, heretics. But sometimes, it's just a whisper in a vial. A moment of clarity too sharp to hold. A dream that feels like truth. A silence that tastes like hope. And then, a needle. And then, something else. Because that's what drugs are in this galaxy. Not escape, not corruption. They're mirrors. And when the Imperium stares into them, what it sees isn't weakness. It sees itself, raw, naked, unendurable. So it flinches. It lights another low stick. It dozes the next recruit. It buries the memory under more noise, more pain, more obedience. The cycle spins again. And we pretend it's control. But the smoke never clears, and the shadows only get deeper.